I would expect one of the best skills a graduate to have is actually the ability to listen and to really analyse what someone is telling them. It's a good point because the briefs you'll be working to are coming from a range of potential clients, and they may all brief in a completely different way. So it's listening. Another skill would be adaptability, to know that things are going to change and that you're going to be part of that change. So being prepared to be adaptable is really important, I feel.
Quite often students want or get the impression they need to be like the greatest designer in the world. But if you're the greatest designer in the world and a bit of a dick, no one's going to want you in the studio. Whereas if you're quite personable, if you get on, if you do things that you're asked, if you show enough interest and initiative and are a capable designer, actually you're going to find that people are going to want you around because you're good to spend time with. You'll stay an hour or two later and contribute and show an interest. So I don't think it's always about being the latest and greatest graphic designer.
I think the most important thing for me when I'm hiring is that I can sense that a graduate has a passion for what they do. We don't have to all have the same personalities. One of the things you get taught is don't hire people just like yourself, or you'll just have a whole load of Abby Ellis's clashing. You want to have all different sorts of people. So it's not about, you can have quiet people, you can have introverted, loud, vocal people, whatever, but most important that they all share is a passion, and that when they talk about their work, something lights up behind their eyes. You can see they're so into it, and that they can talk about their work intelligently and articulate ideas.
Cool.
I don't expect a graduate to be fully rounded. I don't think we're ever fully rounded individuals. All the way through our careers, we're kind of developing our personality. So I don't expect someone to come knowing it all, knowing everything. But I think an open mind is really important to come with. I think you have to be able to communicate. We're in the industry of communication.
The portfolio needs to, primarily for something like LCC, is to show the students individuality, where they're coming from, what they're passionate about. It's a very hard thing to see in a portfolio, and the thing in the portfolio that really gives that away is the sketchbook.
I don't want to see prettiness, just making things attractive. What's the idea behind it? What's the purpose? And I want to see that someone's pushed something and taken it to a place I wouldn't have thought of myself.
I think if we talk about graphic designers first, I think I want to see the kind of work they want to be doing. People look at what you do and assume that's what you want to do, and actually you could show 3 projects and they're the work that you want to do, and you'll get approached by people that want you to come and do that. I think illustration's the one which is easier to sort of identify, which is you'll get commissioned off that style of work that you show. And if you've got a massive breadth of styles, then great, but if not, just show the work that you want to be doing, and I think that's what people sort of respond to.
When someone comes up with their portfolio, I don't really want to see a portfolio that's a finished job. that will never, where the lock's down and they will never change. I think portfolios are evolving all the time and changing. So I think someone's got to come along and be willing to learn from the person they're coming to see, and maybe be able to react from the information that they've heard from the person that's looking at their book and return with new stuff and fresh stuff. If you think how we work in the industry, we're constantly having our work torn down and starting again and back to the drawing board. It's never ever finished. I think that's how your portfolio has to be it a digital portfolio or a proper working case.
Lots of students will say to me, is this really like an industry project? And I'll say, well, it's a simulation of industry, but we try to give you the same feedback, the same conditions as a real brief. An industry brief for me, as opposed to doing a student brief in my own education, is it's the nerves that make it different. So student-led brief, it's not, or student executed brief, I don't have the same kind of nervous disposition as I would have when you're working for a client and they're paying you.
So I think projects always have to have a beginning, a setup, the work, a middle, and then an end, a wrap up as well. So I think it makes sense. So there are often occasions where you can't always be one-to-one when you're showing your portfolio. So I think your projects have to speak for themselves, and we often find that kind of Janet and John approach works with clients as well. That we kind of everything's there to be read and understood, but also it can help with you voice it over as well. But I think definitely consider narrative, that you're always telling a story with your projects. You set up and start, and then the work can speak for itself. It might need a little bit of conversation as well, and always try and wrap this stuff up as well. Counts for everything, but you aren't born with experience. You have to go and get that. I find some of the best creatives don't always come from the colleges. They come from Marks and Spencer's, where they've worked on the shop floor, or maybe they've worked for their dad as a painter and decorator and decide they want to do something with ideas. I mean, all of our great ideas people didn't go and learn that, your Picassos and your David Putnams and whatnot. You go out there and you get experience, you learn on the job. But you bring with that your life experience as well. I think it's really important to have had a life experience. Don't become just kind of this duplicate model student that comes out there, because we see those 10 to the dozen. I think you have to bring a little bit of personality and a little bit of your background when you come out into college.
The graphic designer who is coming in to solve graphic design jobs needs to have the skill set to do those things, and therefore I don't really care too much about the A4 CV that says they studied at this place, got these GCSEs, these A levels, enjoys doing this in their spare time. It's not a big one for me. I think studios are looking for the visual work first, to see something that excites them, to then get them in and have that conversation where I think the personality comes through.
Universities are not preparing graduates well enough. Sometimes I see books where I wonder what the tutor was doing, and that they were not preparing them for today's world or tomorrow's world. Someone's got to have a job for maybe 50 years, be forward thinking. It feels like we're not in the 90s anymore, and I think it's absolutely the responsibility of university to prepare you for work, to help you, and for you to leave with skills that are right for now and knowledge that isn't outdated already.
I think universities have to be constantly in contact with industry. Otherwise, they don't know what they're sending you into. And the nature of the business that we're in is changing all the time. And for the way for colleges and universities to keep up with that is by maintaining constant links with agencies such as LBI and the like.
There's a legal obligation, possibly, to the students, as mentioned in the handbooks, That's like a legal document. Apparently what happens in the handbooks is supposed to happen in your experience as a student at the college on that particular course. The responsibility, I would argue, is an interesting one, because you could argue that the university has a standard, a benchmark, which it has to work from. But do I know what that benchmark is? I probably don't. So I would use my own personal benchmarks to decide for myself where my responsibilities begin and end in the education and development of students. As a team, every course has a team, the team would make decisions about what we considered to be the benchmark and responsibility towards the students.
But if you're not talking to the right people, or showing the right people, or putting it on the right, getting it seen by the right people, you can end up just going totally unnoticed. In the same way, you could probably have all right work, but if you slogged away by meeting people, showing people, talking to people, you can probably get quite far. So I think it's probably 50-50. It might be interesting to look at who you'd consider great designers and look at whether or not they were always amazing from a young age, or whether or not actually they've worked their way up a ladder to become where they are.
I think there is a certain amount of drive that comes from within when it comes to being great at anything. So I don't know about being born, but I think that self-confidence in being good in the first place really helps, and everyone can learn to be better and better and improve your skills. As I said at the beginning, people that are willing to learn are going to go further in this industry.
I do think that right from when you're little, a lot of designers probably always wanted to do something creative. We're always creative. You just get better at it.
The thing about being made is interesting, because you can be born a genius and never fulfill that genius. But if you're born a genius and that genius is fostered and developed and encouraged, then you can go on to become something quite incredible.
For design education to change. I think I understand why it doesn't. I'm not for a second having a go at universities. It's such a massive machine that to try and change one thing within that machine you can't do overnight. But university seems to be something that for the last 50 years has tried to offer a very similar thing, and it's reacted very tentatively to technology changes, to industry changes, to all this stuff. And I think actually if you were to give it a totally blank slate, I think there's a lot of things that you could do. I think things that I'd look to do immediately would be to throw people into industry within a 3-year course.
I would plant a lot more of you guys in industry earlier on to see how you get along. I think you need massive exposure. The course that I did all those years ago, almost 20 years ago, the second year I wasn't really at college. I was in London with my portfolio, going around doing placements and working already. I think that's the thing. I think you need to be planted in the industry pretty early on, just to get your head around what you'll be doing, yeah, and how to behave, what's the correct conduct, who to stick to. I think in that way as well, you'll create your relationships within the industry yourself. And then when it comes to time to sort of cut those apron strings with the colleges, you'll be ready to go into industry.
I would introduce storytelling as part of the curriculum, and that wouldn't necessarily be creating storyboards. I'm talking about the real structure of storytelling, which is essentially writing. So I'd introduce writing as part of the curriculum to help students tell stories in visual terms.
Stop bloody going straight to Mac, dudes, and stop seeking influence from other designers. Influence can come from an apple or a piece of art or the ocean or a conversation from words. I don't know, just don't create out of a vacuum. Stop bloody